Yeah, perfect. Have we started, guys?
We certainly have.
Welcome, viewers. Welcome, everybody. We have an amazing team today. We have the one and only Brian, and we also have the one and only Alex. Amazing guys, very knowledgeable about geopolitics. We got a fantastic show for you today. So, Alex, take it away, and let's.
Wow. Well, AJ, I was looking forward to kind of just sitting back, relaxing tonight, and letting you run the show.
I thought you were going to start, then you didn't say anything, so that's all right.
Well, this is quite the honor here to be a guest on AJ's platform tonight, and of course, what a treat we have with Brian Berletic here. Now, as you already know, Brian has done amazing coverage on the Ukraine and Russia conflict, and it's really a treat to bring him on this program. We do what we can to bring on the experts because, as you know, in the collective West or the mainstream media, those experts left the show decades ago. I'm going to pass it over to Brian. Brian, maybe you can introduce to the audience a little bit about yourself, how amazing your channel has grown in the last few months, and well, tell us from the geopolitical side, what is your interest and your focus at this time?
Well, first of all, thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure. It's also nice to be back on screen with you, Alex. I've actually had you on my channel.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, I've been doing a lot of work about Ukraine, but what a lot of new subscribers don't know is that my main focus is actually Asia, Southeast Asia, and Thailand specifically, because that's where I live. And I got into geopolitical analysis out of necessity. I'm obviously interested in what's going on around the world, but I was a U.S. Marine. I woke up while I was a U.S. Marine. I realized what I was involved in, that this was not defending the U.S. This was perpetuating empire. I wanted nothing to do with it. I had been stationed in Asia the entire time, mainly Japan, but I had did a deployment to Thailand, and I figured, go back to Thailand. It was great. It was nice. And it would not be a bad place to go rather than stay in the U.S. I felt so strongly about what the U.S. was doing at that time. It was invading Iraq. This was 2003, 2004. And I felt so strongly about it. I didn't want to even be in the country. I didn't want to contribute or participate in even the most minor way. So I went to Thailand, which is almost completely on the other side of the planet. But over the years in Thailand, I realized that the U.S., its reach goes far, and it was meddling in Thailand. I started doing my research. I came across the National Endowment for Democracy. I saw all of these NGOs here in Thailand funded by the NED, and I started covering it around 2009, 2010, because that's when these color revolutions kicked off here. And then the next year, 2011, was the Arab Spring. And then that is where I was writing every single day at the time under a pen name. I was not doing videos back then. And that my work gained traction because people were interested in what was the money and the interests and the planning that went behind this supposedly spontaneous uprising. And then I realized that the danger in Thailand may have passed, but that was only temporary. Eventually, it was going to come back again. And so if I could educate people about what was going on in places like Libya, Syria, or in 2014 and onward, Ukraine, people would understand what was going on. Say if this turmoil came back to Asia, they would already know all of these phrases, these organizations, the way the funding works, and I wouldn't have to start from zero. So that is what has driven my work this entire time. If and when U.S. meddling and interference and even aggression revisits Asia, I want to be ahead of it. And that's why I do what I do. I'm laser focused on the situation in Ukraine because after Ukraine and Russia, the U.S. is going to move on to China. And there's a multitude of vectors that the U.S. can use to go after China. So I guess that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I think, Brian, we all owe you a debt of gratitude for your work. You have been absolutely amazing in spreading the truth and telling people how it really is. We need more people like you, and I just want to congratulate you on what you're doing, and I want you to kind of continue doing it as long as you can, because I think it's voices like us, which we are in the minority. You look at YouTube as as a platform, and there's millions and millions and even billions of channels out there, but you can actually count how many channels there are speaking the truth, and there's probably less than 10, I would say. Over to you, Alex.
I understand that point completely, AJ. Being based here in China comes with its little bit of difficulties, and I'm not talking about me on the ground here. I'm talking about all the brains that have been brainwashed in the Western countries, that immediately it is China bad, China bad, China bad, or China is an adversary. This is what the mainstream media has been pumping out to the to a majority of the easily led public. Now, what happens with that is it actually puts people like myself in a little bit of a danger. And I'm not looking for pity here. I'm trying to just be very clear with you that you can imagine, as a Canadian here living in China, reporting in China on quite a bit of different variety of things. Just like Brian, my focus is to pretty much show everything about China. That's whether it's in the streets, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's following a police crew around, filming them, because I do have a fair amount of contacts here and a fair amount of trust built. But when you try to relay this information to people that have or think they know, we'll call them the armchair warriors as well, or they're sitting in their basement coming up with an assumption, you can just imagine the type of emails or the threats that I would say pretty much everybody on this screen gets. Now, we understand that. That's okay. We know that we're here to, move forward and try to educate not only ourselves, but to also educate you, the viewers. And sharing the screen with Brian a few months ago, I could see that Brian could not leave this Ukraine-Russia thing. He had to see it through. He has dedicated hours and hours and hours. Once these cameras are off tonight, Brian is on to the research. Brian continues to go in depth, okay? Just like everybody that's sharing this channel here tonight, we do that. Other channels, the Duran, they do that. Patrick Lancaster, can you imagine this? Can you imagine the story that you would get out of Eastern Ukraine if Patrick Lancaster wasn't there the last 9 years recording it? You'd get nothing. And
Exactly.
that's why it's crucial for these people that are sharing the screen, for many other people outside of the screen, is to get our message through. And AJ, I think your pursuit to collaborate with many YouTubers, you're on the right mission. You have an amazing subscriber base as well. And let's really get into it tonight here. I know Brian knows a lot of stuff. And Brian, can you give us the latest on what you feel is going on? Western media is saying Russia is about to get, pushed back. They're giving up ground. Every time I listen to you, I know it's well researched and it's educational. Let's hear it.
Before we make a start, Brian, I just wanted to thank all the moderators out there, and we have about 600 people viewing in. So if you can kindly make sure you make sure you share, subscribe, would be very much appreciated. So over to you, Brian. And also, for those of you who do not know me, who do not follow my channel, one of the reasons my face is not on there, because I actually work for the government. I am part of the civil service, and like Brian said, we all have stories, and unfortunately, I am still working for the government. And those of you who think, oh, he's not brave, well, you've got to look at somebody like Graham Phillips. If you do not know if you do not know who Graham Phillips is, you're welcome to Google him. He's a British citizen. He got sanctioned. He lost his home. He lost his bank account. He's got absolutely nothing at the moment, and that's why a lot of people that live in UK who all work in the government have to be extra careful, extra vigilant. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. It is a big risk some of us are taking, going onto YouTube and speaking our minds. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. I'm happy to show my face if I ever leave my job or if I get sacked. But until then, not quite. So over to you, Brian.
Sure.
Happy for you to carry
I
on.
just want to add onto that. When I left the Marine Corps, it was not easy, and it was extremely dangerous. And I was in the brig for a while, but that I was a young guy, and I you could even say that I was stupid and careless, and I wasn't really thinking things through. It was kind of a rash decision. And I know many really good guys in the Marine Corps. They were older, and they agreed with me when I was telling them that why I was doing what I was doing. They agreed with me 100%, but their whole life was tied to that, and they were at a period of time where it wasn't that easy to just stop and restart their lives again. So, like you said, there's a story behind everybody, especially when you get involved in this. It is dangerous, and I don't blame people for not getting involved, not doing more, because it is dangerous. I'm on some Ukrainian government list, so yeah, I totally understand that, and people need to keep all of that in mind. And there's a role for everyone to play, big or small. So I mean, people just out there sharing this with other people, that is a small thing, but it is an important thing.
Yeah, Brian, I'm on an NGO list as well, and even though my channel is not even big, I'm still on there, and it just shows their desperation. Even they're attacking small channels like myself.
Well, so that's a good. Oh, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
That's okay. Just to add to that, I've probably got about 5,000 people that would like to meet me at the Canadian border if I fly into Canada. So I hear you guys. It's extremely, and we chuckle about this, but I'm quite serious about these situations. I know that I've had a lot of conversations with Patrick Lancaster, and he's pretty balanced in what he says. He says, go check out both sides, come up with your conclusions, make your own judgments. But it's guys like Brian, guys like AJ, myself, that we're here for a reason. I've never imagined actually having a channel on YouTube, especially in China. But I purposely have dedicated the next 2 or 3 years of my life to be here in China to tell the story. When you get to that point where, the guys that I'm sharing this screen with, you guys, Brian, AJ, you know what I'm talking about, right? I don't know when that moment was with you, Brian. Maybe you can share us when that moment was for you and you said, wait a minute, I have to do something about this. When would that been?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've told this story many times, but I will say again, I was in the Marine Corps. I signed up because I really believed I was doing something to defend my country. I had some very convoluted ideas in my head as to why we were all over the world. I had family members that tried to stop me from joining. But when I was in, because I really honestly wanted to do the right thing, I couldn't bring myself to lie to myself or others about what I was seeing for real versus what I thought I was seeing. I think being in Japan and just seeing people there who didn't want us there, and the way U.S. Marines treated the locals, that disgusted me. That made me feel ashamed. When we deployed to Thailand, it was the exact same thing. There were things that we did there in training, artillery training. We were firing 90-pound artillery rounds over people's houses. That would never be allowed in Japan or the United States. And the officers were all aware of the danger. They just didn't care because that is the attitude. And I remember this incident. We were at the base of Mount Fuji doing live fire exercises with artillery, and the officer had his watch, and the Japanese government said, "Can you stop at this time because of the school schedule down in the town below?" And so he watched his wristwatch, made sure we went over 5 minutes deliberately, kind of to say, hey, we're in charge here. Even though it's your country, we're in charge here. We'll go over 5 minutes. One of those power move things that we see people do. So all of it added up. I can't say there was one specific moment, but it all added up to a single moment where I was sitting on stairs actually thinking, like, what am I doing here? And then I made the decision to get out. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I mean, that was the start. But AJ, you said people are desperate. The West is desperate. They put you on a list, even though you see yourself as a minor figure. I would say that I'm a pretty minor figure, and I think desperation. If we're going to talk about the situation in Ukraine, Western desperation is what we see coming into focus. We're hearing about the dirty bomb. This is Russia putting out this warning that they claim to have information about a potential dirty bomb, which to my understanding is just a regular bomb mixed with radioactive material, so that when it goes off, it disperses radioactive material. Now, Russia has done this before in Syria, and they were telling the truth, because after that, the US-backed militants operating in Syria did actually carry out a number of false flag attacks, claiming that the Syrian government was gassing its own people. And it turned out it was actually the US-backed militants doing that. And the Russian government would try to get ahead of these incidents by warning everyone that another one is coming. And eventually we saw these false flag operations stop. Maybe not because of that, maybe just because the whole conflict was winding down. But now we see the same thing happening here in Ukraine. And there's much more at stake, because I don't think anyone has ever detonated a dirty bomb before. So this would be unprecedented. But the desperation in Kiev, Washington, London, Brussels, that the desperation is unprecedented. So we have to wait and see what actually ends up happening.
Sure. So I think all the viewers will want to know, how the hell did Ukraine get hold of a dirty bomb? I mean, technically, we all know that Ukraine has had nukes before from the Soviet era, but we believe that they were given back to Russia, or Russia took them back as part of the peace agreements. I'm not sure, but they do have 3 or 4 nuclear power plants in Ukraine. So do you think they've been building up these dirty bombs in secret, or how do you think they've managed to get hold of it?
I will admit that I'm not an expert in this subject, so this is just speculation. And if anyone is an expert, correct me if I'm wrong. But all you would need is to find some radioactive waste that you could just include into a conventional bomb. You could make it a small bomb, a gigantic bomb. It's really very easy to customize this sort of thing. But the problem is, radioactive material is tracked, I think, very closely, and Ukraine would have to figure out a way to get a hold of this and do it in a way that wouldn't make it abundantly obvious that Ukraine did this. So maybe they would get material from a power plant that Russia had been at and then withdrew from, maybe Chernobyl, because in the beginning of the conflict, Russian forces were there, and now they're not there. So I don't think there's any way that Ukraine could do this, and it would, to anyone using critical thinking, would say, yeah, Russia did that. There's no reason for Russia to use a dirty bomb. They have regular nuclear bombs. Why would they need a dirty bomb? A dirty bomb is beneath the conventional weapons that they have. They have plenty of conventional weapons that could do much more damage. Look at Ukraine's power grid, for example. They don't need to use a dirty bomb. Ukraine does, as a pretext for the West to get involved. This is the thinking going on in someone's head, if this is what they're actually doing.
Okay, so let me give you a scenario. We've all seen how that truck bomb blew up in the Crimean Bridge. And obviously, it went through the checkpoints, no issues, and it blew up in the middle of the bridge. So imagine this scenario. Somehow, Ukraine managed to put a dirty bomb in a truck, drives all the way into Russia, blows it up in Moscow. Can you imagine the casualties that would cause? And what do you think Russia would do in return? They would obviously fire nukes in return, wouldn't you think? What's your opinion?
I think Russia would only use nuclear weapons as an absolute last resort. Even a dirty bomb, as egregious as that would be, I don't think that they would use nuclear weapons in retaliation, but you would certainly have opened the door a little bit of a way for them to eventually work their way toward that direction. But I think the retaliation would be massive. Whatever that you think they're doing to the electric grid right now and to decision-making centers now and other types of infrastructure now, it would be multiplied. And I remember all of these months, people said, special military operation, that's just a euphemism for all-out war. And when you read the Western media, they go out of their way to say all-out invasion. But it is not an all-out invasion. It really is a special military operation. And if there's one thing that this bombing and drone and missile strike campaign on the electric grid proves, is that Russia has many opportunities, a lot of latitude to expand this as much as they want. And so if they do a dirty bomb in Moscow, first of all, it'll be obvious that it was Ukraine who did it.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking that if they were going to do a dirty bomb, it would be somewhere in Ukraine so that they could claim Russia did it, so that they could give the West a justification to get involved directly in the conflict, which is something I can't count it out, but I really don't think the West would want to. The whole point of a proxy war is to get other people killed with other people's money, not to get involved in it yourself. So,
Alex, your thoughts?
Well, I think Brian will agree with me here when it comes to nuclear warheads. I mean, visiting Japan in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, even as a tourist to those areas, you can see the carnage that those weapons left behind. I'm not sure the world has an appetite to ever repeat or see something like that ever again. It's pretty catastrophic. I know visiting those sites a few years ago has always, left a thought in my mind that, first, how did that ever happen to begin with? The world, I thought at that time, must have gone real mad. I don't think we're there yet. There's talks, there's people, puffing up their chest saying, well, we got these, but you have a country that can defend itself. Russia can defend itself. And I think the Americans, as much as they want to show superiority against the Russian military, has enough common sense that if they let one of those rip in the air, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be all out, and then it'll be over for everyone. So I don't think we're going to get there. I don't want to go there either. But yeah, that site in Japan, I'm sure, Brian, you visited it a few times down there. That is absolutely mind-blowing.
So let me give you this possible scenario. Do you think the West is helping Ukraine build this dirty bomb? I mean, we all know that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would not have been blown up by Ukraine by itself. They would have had a lot of help. They would have probably US did it mostly, and even though they don't like to admit it, everyone in the world knows it, they did it. Do you think that the West will help them build a nuclear bomb? And do you think that might be a pretense for a nuclear escalation, Brian?
I think there's two possibilities. I think there's a possibility that Ukraine is doing this unilaterally. The problem the United States constantly has is that the people they approach in any targeted country and sponsor and build up, these are the absolute worst in any given society. These are people who could not get into power on their own merit because they have no merit. They're just vicious, ruthless, and fanatical. And this is why the US picks them, because they are fanatics. They don't think before they do anything. And you see Ukraine in the situation that it's in now, and some of the things that they do that I'm sure people in Washington, London, Brussels are face palming very often, because these are things that are counterproductive and making it that much harder. The videos of them torturing and killing prisoners of war. I mean, why would you do that? And they did it repeatedly, to the point where even the New York Times had to cover it. So this is a possibility that they might be doing something this ill-advised, this irreversible, this and poorly conceived, because it is not going to do what they think it's going to do. It is not. It's going to blow back in their face, maybe even literally. If if the West was helping them, there's a possibility that the West is engineering some sort of false flag because they want to get involved directly. I don't think that it's a high probability, but there is always that possibility. We would never know. I mean, there's a lot of things like Nord Stream, the Nord Stream pipelines blowing up. We're never going to know for sure unless someone comes out and admits something, or we get very lucky and that information is made available. But other than that, we'll just have to guess it perpetually because we will never know. So I think there's two possibilities. That I think the one that is most probable is Ukraine just doing it on their own because they are detached from reality. They are desperate, and they can. And so it's the only thing they can do.
And you're right. I mean, thinking about what Ukraine has done in the past. They were shelling the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. So obviously they was trying to somehow escalate things there. Because if one of those shells had hit that power plant, then it would have caused a huge catastrophe. We're talking about Chernobyl levels. So that has failed now. And obviously the next step is to build a dirty bomb and release that. So it does sound like, the evidence points to Ukraine somehow doing that. And plus, Zelensky came on the other day talking about preemptive strike against Russia, a nuclear preemptive strike. And even though the West is not going to do it, he might do it. He might say, "Oh, we had to do this." What are your thoughts, Alex? What would you think? And then we go to Brian.
I think there's two things that we still are missing here. First, before Ukraine got into this conflict, this country's infrastructure wasn't great to begin with. And you're trying to now build up this military, as Brian said, over the last few months, they can only do so much. If you're going to have anti-aircraft set up, that's going to take months, years possibly, to get that in order. Another thing that I think people are missing here is the Ukraine government, they're bad actors. Let's look back at Maidan in 2014. There was a phone call with Victoria Nuland that admitted that, wait a moment, this sniper shots actually weren't coming from the police on the people. They were actually going the wrong way. And they can't get the clown show in order there. That's the unfortunate thing. And the sad part is, it's sad for the people of Ukraine because they're caught in this. And, all countries that are involved in this should take a step back and see really what's going on here. And how this all started, in 2014, the conflict. I think a lot of the viewers were not aware that, Yanukovych was actually the governor of the Donbass area. And you want to be proud of a guy that is a president in that region. And then overnight, he's basically had to flee the country. And ever since that night happened, this country has never got back in order. They try to do a lot of online stuff. I mean, this you got to remember, this is a pretty lawless country before all of this started, and there's no change in that. Some of these weapons, as Brian has indicated before, never make it into Ukraine. They are for sale. You've got countries that border. I'm going to make a kind of like a prediction here, and maybe Brian will back me up on this. Transnistria is a breakaway country. Well, it is an independent country, depends who you ask, but it's sandwiched right between Moldova and the Ukraine. I guarantee you that some of these weapons are probably sitting in the territory of Transnistria. This is pretty much a borderless country that does support Russia, wants to be part of Russia. But there is a massive arms trade going on there. And it wouldn't take much to take a few packages that were in Poland, intended to go into the Ukraine, slip them across the Dniester River, and then they're into Europe. And this, I think, Brian, a lot of this artillery that is used may end up on the streets in Europe in the next few years. Thoughts on that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Brian?
well, look at the situation in Libya, how we were all lied into that conflict, how the truth was revealed that we're not helping pro-democracy freedom fighters, we're helping literally Libya's Al-Qaeda franchise. And then the collapse of Libya, the torrent of refugees fleeing. And then also because Libya was a destination for refugees from across Africa fleeing other proxy conflicts the West was sponsoring, they just continued on their way through Libya into Europe. And so that created a huge problem for Europe. And this was something that even Muammar Gaddafi predicted before that even happened. So this in Ukraine obviously is going to have ramifications down the road. Some are predictable, some will be unpredictable. These weapons floating around, yes, obviously the huge amounts of fanatics that the West has deliberately encouraged the creation of from 2014 onward, that is going to have a lasting impact on the European continent. This is, and just think about all of these fanatics once the conflict is over, and if they have to leave Ukraine, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? They're going to do something similar to what Al-Qaeda did, and the U.S. will probably continue using them and encouraging their activities around the world. So especially all throughout Europe. I don't know if people remember, this is a Cold War type of thing, the Operation Gladio, and the U.S. was using far-right extremists, Nazis essentially, literal Nazis from World War II. They were using them, creating networks across Europe to stage attacks, to target certain governments, to coerce different members of the European community. So something like that very easily can unfold in the wake of this. So it is over. It's not actually ever really over.
You made some great points, Brian. Let me put some scary scenarios in front of both of you, and I want you both to kind of answer the best you can. Imagine this dirty bomb goes off in Ukraine, and we all know that the weapons in Ukraine are in the black market, in the, you know, they're selling for whoever wants to buy them. So imagine if a dirty bomb goes off somewhere and the war on terror is still not over. You know, there's still terrorists all, you know, looming all over the world. They're in Syria, they're in Iraq, they're in Afghanistan. Imagine if somebody with some money goes to Ukraine and say, you know, we like what you did with the dirty bomb. Can we have one, please? We'll give you this much money. What's to say they're not going to give it? Of course they're going to give it, right? I mean, imagine how much more dangerous the world will be if this dirty bomb goes off and people with money get that kind of technology, take it to the West, blow it up in the middle of Germany or maybe UK or even United States. Can you imagine how scary things are going to be? What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, look at all the criminal factions that Ukraine is attracting to the fighting itself. These are groups from outside the country. They have their own networks, extremist networks. And so, yes, that is very scary if they see this process of putting together one of these dirty bombs and they're able to get their hands on radioactive material. It's very dangerous. And this is what the U.S. does all the time. They destabilize these countries with reckless abandon. They don't think, or they do think, and they just don't care about all of the ramifications this is going to have down the road, how dangerous it is. Because again, for the special interests running the United States or the European Union or the UK, these are people who are not paying for this with their own money. It's taxpayer money, and it's not them bleeding. It's not them facing the risk of death, fighting and the ramifications, the fallout of all of this. It's other people, and so there really is no motivation for them to stop doing it. So again, this is the latest chapter.
What about you, Alex? You mentioned something about you wanted to talk about Lithuania as well.
Sure, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But these guns, this ammunition, these life-killing weapons are already on the streets. And they're already sitting in warehouses, probably in the outskirts of many major European cities already. They probably were sold. I'm not even going to say probably. A lot of them were sold either in Poland when they were dropped off there. I mean, Brian, you know how easy it would be to, container lost here, half a 20-foot container lost there, a couple of pallets here, a couple of pallets there. Got to remember that you know, Ukraine was a pretty desperate country before all this happened. It was already pillaged throughout the years. Lawless, absolutely. And that's not to say that it couldn't have gone on the right track moving forward. But you just got to go back and look at the history and how this all started. And even from 2014 forward, there were so many organizations being formed, whether they were far right, whether they were, Azov. I mean, these guys knew that this military hardware was coming. I'll give you an example, AJ. Let's say you're a soldier in the Ukrainian army and you make $300 a month to fight for your country. And all of a sudden, there's a few pallets of ammunition there that you could sell a couple of those and probably live very comfortable for the next 10 or 15 years. You can't tell me that 1 or 2 or maybe 20 or 100 of those have not gone missing. They're definitely gone. They're definitely into the black market. They're sitting and this isn't Hollywood, guys. I'm not talking Hollywood here. These pallets are sitting in a major European cities all over Europe. When will we see them get to the streets? Probably when all this is over and everyone's forgot about it. And as Brian said, there's a lot of criminal organizations out there that are already set up for this kind of hardware. They know how to move this stuff. They know how to get it through those networks. I think you know how this works, right, Brian, with this type of hardware? I mean, who would be the first organization that would say, we'll take everything?
The first and foremost criminal organization on planet Earth is probably the CIA. And we know that all of those weapons going to the terrorists, literally Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, these were weapons being brought in by the plane load by the United States from Eastern European countries. It's exactly as you say, Alex. These are people who had all of these weapons and pallets and containers, and the CIA just bought them up and sent them to terrorists in Syria. So where might we most likely see these weapons turn up? Most likely in some CIA-sponsored destabilization operation. There's weapons in, like, again, 2010 here in Bangkok. I mean, that's what got me involved. The U.S.-backed opposition had war weapons in the streets, and I'm not saying that they came from Eastern Europe necessarily, but guns don't grow on trees. They have to come from somewhere. And so this is where they come from. That they create this type of instability for their own ends, but there's alternative opportunities here that are available to them, and they will take full advantage of that. So these weapons floating around now, they'll be the color revolution tomorrow.
I'm going to add to that point, Brian. There was a fellow that told me on a live stream that I did about a month ago. He says, the Americans can eventually get hardware into the Ukraine. A lot of it will be picked up by aerial or by drones and destroyed. But he says it's the true criminals that can really get hardware into countries through their network undetected. And that right there said to me, whoa, okay, these guys are probably sitting there at the port of entries, Poland. That might be one of the major distribution points, knowing that there's millions of dollars sitting in hangars, millions of dollars sitting in bonded warehouses. It doesn't take long to figure that out. 1 or 2 go missing, 3 or 4 go missing. No big deal, but we'll see how this plays out. And I hope that the hardware that's being shipped over to that country slows down. I'm not saying that a country shouldn't defend itself, but we all know what's going on here with the military-industrial complex. It's very clear. If you want me to make that point on Lithuania, I can get it out of the way, or do you want me to wait for later, AJ?
Yeah, let's wait for later.
Sure.
We've got 1,332 people here today, so I really appreciate you guys listening to us. Don't forget, it's very important to like, share where you can. It's important to spread this out to as many people as possible. So we appreciate your help. So Brian, let's talk about Ukraine a bit more. We all know these Iranian drones have been causing havoc all over Ukraine. There's no answers that the Ukrainian air defense can do. And you've seen images of police officers and soldiers trying to shoot it down with their machine guns. And we all know Kiev's surrounded by NATO-based anti-aircraft missiles, and they've been absolutely hopeless. So I want to talk a bit further about this. First of all, there's speculation whether they are Iranian drones or not. But if they are, isn't this gonna scare the West even more? Because everyone's been told that Iranians can't do anything. They've been sanctioned for years, and suddenly they're coming out with these amazing drones which are bypassing air defenses, causing major havoc all over Ukraine. And the West is absolutely freaking out, and Americans are freaking out. The Israelis are freaking out, thinking, well, how the hell did Iran get this kind of technology? What's your thoughts about that?
Oh, there's a lot to get into there. First of all, I don't know if people know this, but Iran even has its own space program. They can launch satellites into space, not nowhere on the level of, say, the US, China, or Russia, but they can. And it goes to show you what they're able to achieve even under these crippling decades-long sanctions. Now, Russia insists that these are not drones that they bought from Iran, but they do have a striking resemblance to drones that Iran operates. But maybe Russia is just making them under license in Russia. Is a good possibility of that. I think the problem with Ukraine's air defense systems is their air defense systems at the beginning of this conflict, the end of February, they're Soviet-based. Things like S-300, different systems like this, they're excellent. The Soviet Union and now Russia make the best air defense systems in the world. The problem is Ukraine has a finite supply of them. If they get blown up, and people have probably seen videos of Russia destroying 3, 4, 5 of these launchers all at one time. They're all concentrated in the same area, and Russia just blows them all up at the same time. They expend interceptors, these missiles that they use to down aircraft, cruise missiles, and drones. There's a finite supply of them. This conflict has been intense and ongoing for months, over half a year now. They're going to be running out of these things. They don't have factories where they can build this. Again, Russia has destroyed Ukraine's military-industrial capacity. And even Western analysts admit that the West has not really invested heavily in air defense in the sense of ground-based surface-to-air missiles. They focus more on air superiority with fighters, interceptors, warplanes, essentially. And so that this has been and will be a weak point for the West. So whatever systems they're going to send Ukraine, they are going to be inferior to the Soviet-era systems Ukraine had. And to compound that problem is the fact that the West does not have a lot of anti-air defense systems to send Ukraine. They said one IRIS-T system, one system does not make an air defense network. It's just one launcher and maybe a separate radar set, and that's it. Very limited in what it can do. They're going to send another 3 over the course of next year at earliest. So you can see there's a numbers problem here. And by the time all 4 are in Ukraine, there is no guarantee that the first 1 or 2 or 3 weren't found and destroyed, just as Russia has been destroying all of Ukraine's other air defense systems. So this is going to be a constant problem. The drones, they fly low. They're smaller than a warplane. These are things that would be hard for most air defense systems to see and target in the conventional way. So it could be a combination of Ukraine is just running out of launchers, running out of missiles, or they're just not capable of hitting this type of target, all contributing to the fact that they've got these drones wiping out their essential infrastructure. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. Would you say that this is like would you say the US military is like a sports game where offense is the best defense, which means US is focusing on having their air power, military might, rather than focusing on defense? And is this why Russia has better air defense system than the United States does?
I think that's a fair way of saying it. I mean, to just think about all of U.S. wars of aggression, they have a small necessity to be able to have air defense, but usually how do they knock out enemy aircraft? With their own aircraft, usually before the enemy aircraft get off the ground. But if they do get off the ground, U.S. warplanes will take them out. It's usually not ground-based air defense systems that do that. So they have focused a lot on building up a massive fleet of warplanes to do this rather than ground-based launchers. And because they are always on the offensive.
Yeah, and there's examples of this in Saudi Arabia where Patriots have been absolutely useless against Houthi missiles and drones. It's come to a point now where United States has taken away these Patriots because they have been absolutely useless, and and I think it's much easier to take them away than to keep them there and showing they're ineffective. What do you think? I mean, these Patriot systems, they really haven't been tested, have they?
Yes, and this is not AJ saying this because he's a Putin propagandist. This is actually Western analysts. This is consensus among Western analysts that the Patriot does not live up to expectations, that it has not performed well during any conflict. And Saudi Arabia and its war on Yemen, this is just the latest example. And yeah, a lot was getting through. Ballistic missiles, drones, they were getting through these air defenses. The missiles were firing and missing targets and then just falling onto the ground. And they were running out of missiles. There was a crisis where Saudi Arabia was out of interceptors. They asked the United States for more. The United States is not capable of making more fast enough. And so they told other nations in the Persian Gulf to go through their inventory and see what they could spare for Saudi Arabia. It's a very sad state of affairs. But it's also the true face of U.S. military power. They spend a lot of money, there's no doubt, but it's not going to actual capabilities. It's going into the coffers of these corporations.
Brian, I got to ask you this. I mean, before Ukraine, before there was China, there's also before there was the war on terror. We've been hearing for 20, 30 years that Israel is going to attack Iran, or the West is going to attack Iran, because for them, Iran has been under heavy sanctions, and they're always talking about it. I mean, you see papers and you see past presidents who have mentioned it as well. Is this off the table now? Is Iran become too powerful for that to happen now? I mean, looking at these drones and seeing how Iran has technologically advanced, is it too late? Is Iran too powerful now for Israel to attack? I mean, you've seen Israel attacking the Iraqi nuclear power plant back in the day, 1980s, yes. The Bush Air, I believe. And do you think Iran is still a target? And do you think Iran is going to be a target now that the West thinks that Iran is arming Russia? And do you think Iran might be a target because of that?
I mean, that's a good point. And the way you put it is important for people to understand. The West is not having a change in policy. There's a change in reality that their policy simply can do nothing with. So yes, Iran is more and more capable militarily. They have been escaping these sanctions. They are building alliances and friendships and economic relationships with nations around the globe. You can see this alternative system, or multipolarism, if you want to call it, coming into focus. And the U.S. and by proxy through Israel, they have always wanted to attack Iran, but it's not practical. And each year that goes by, just as you're saying, it becomes harder and harder because Iran is building up its capabilities. And so a conventional military strike on Iran, I can't say that it's ruled out. They might decide to throw everything they've got all at one go, hoping to get lucky or something. You can never rule it out. But Iran has always been under attack, just not in the conventional way. They have these mobs. They have terrorists that the U.S. admits that they wanted to sponsor, that they took off terrorist lists so that they could sponsor, attacking them economically, just in every way imaginable. These proxy wars, the U.S. is waging a proxy war on Syria. This is one of Iran's closest allies. So they have been attacking Iran, just not directly. And I imagine that will continue for as long as they can. But just as you say, things are changing and it's just not practical anymore.
Before I move to you, Alex, I just want to also say I watched Top Gun 2 the other day, and it made over $1 billion. And there is a country they are bombing, and suspiciously it looked like Iran. So, and they're blowing up this nuclear facility in a Middle Eastern country. Obviously, they didn't name Iran, but I think everyone knew it was Iran. Do you think they're getting the American public used to the idea of doing that? I mean, or do they have other issues happening around the world, like in Ukraine, like in China, for example?
Oh, is this for me? Yeah, no, this is something that has been a constant process. Yes, getting the American people okay with the idea that Russians, Iranians, the Chinese, they're all subhuman. They're barbarians. They're a constant danger. They're not like us. It's okay for us to do this to them. And if it were to ever come down to it, you should support a war against these countries. And yes, Hollywood obviously plays a huge role in advancing that agenda, the propaganda. I mean, you look everywhere. You can't just go watch them. If you're a geopolitical analyst, you can't watch a movie to switch off because it's saturated. Netflix, Hollywood movies, TV series, it's saturated with this propaganda. You're absolutely right. That's what they're trying to do. They've been doing it for decades too, by the way.
Over to you, Alex. Any thoughts?
I'm going to echo Brian's word there. Actually, Top Gun, you could see that it was delayed a couple of times. And we all know it's easy to research on this, as I do try to research in depth a lot of things that I talk about. This one in particular, this movie, there was involvement from the Pentagon with this movie. Also in the last Top Gun, it was used as a recruitment tool for the United States Navy. My father actually served in the Canadian Navy and my grandfather in the Second World War in the Canadian Navy. These are propaganda machines. That Top Gun movie, clear propaganda. The bizarre thing about it is it did over $1 billion in sales for the movie. So thank you to the viewers for supporting one of the biggest propaganda movies of the year. You've paid for it, not only for the actors, but you've probably got the US government's money back that they had to put into that movie. So nice job on that one. Moving forward on that, you have to understand that each country has to sell it to its people. Let's go back. And there's a country that I was really researching back in the late 1980s and then into the 90s. My father told me that about 2 weeks before the Yugoslavian war happened, that America was going in there. And I said, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. And he says, listen, you have to understand when the drums are beating, America will streamline, go into it. And this was around the time where Bill Clinton was about to be impeached. The dress that revealed the